This program is part of the Infinite Potato Alliance. Visit us at infinitepotato.com.
I'm Shane Thomas, and this is Analysing Doctor Who. I'm joined by Chris Kocher and Mike Robinson, and today we'll be analysing and it's good to say this again, the Doctor Who Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road. And listeners, if you have any thoughts on what you're about to hear from us, or anything else Doctor Who based, you can reach us at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com. So Chris, what's your rating out of 10 for this episode?
I would say 8.
Okay, Mike?
I'll give it an 8. I'll probably start getting enthusiastic and say I should have said 9 later.
And I'll give it a 7. Mike, if I come to you on what from this episode you like the most?
Last time I was hanging out with you, I told you sort of like I'm a long-time Doctor Who fan, and so I live in this world where I still think that Doctor Who is this brand new thing. So one of the most exciting things about this was just getting such a successful set of episodes, and particularly having a nice launch for Ncuti Gatwa and this 15th Doctor. In general terms, that was just really exciting, and it became a very exciting part of our Christmas day. I know that over in the UK, there's television viewing traditions and habits. It's not really something that happens here in the States in quite the same way. And a lot of times when it does, it's around sports. So it was really just fantastic to sit down on Christmas Day. We did our presents, and then for us, it was a little bit after lunchtime, and we sat down and we watched a really great episode. You know, is it perfect? No, but it was so enthusiastic. It was so exciting. It was so amazing to see that we were right, that Ncuti Gatwa was going to jump into this thing with so much enthusiasm and so much energy. So for me, it was the overall tone of the episode, right? Like you said, it was fantastic to have a Christmas episode back, and it really felt like Christmas, and it was really exciting to be sharing it with the family.
For those who may not know outside the UK, I mean, you're right, Mike, that Christmas special episodes of stuff is something of a long-standing tradition. It's not as much with Doctor Who. That was something that was started by Russell. So this is now David Tennant's first episode in 2006, or I guess the end of 2005. And all traditions got to start somewhere. It continued with Moffat, went away under Chibnall. I suspect he didn't want it to go away. I think that was probably more imposed on him. And I don't think it's a surprise. And as I've said many times, one of the positives I was looking forward to with Davis returning, I said, I bet there'll be Christmas specials again. Because Davis Watcher won't stand for there not being one. For people that have only kind of really known Doctor Who from the 9th to the 10th, or even more recently, Doctor Who Christmas specials like, oh yeah, Doctor Who's on at Christmas Day. And it is good that that tradition is kind of been revived. Chris, what from this episode did you like the most?
What I liked the most was the fact that it was such a great introduction. If this is your jumping on point, and clearly that's the theory for Russell T and elsewhere in the world for people tuning in on Disney Plus. I mean, if this was the first episode that I saw, I would certainly be intrigued enough to continue on when the new series starts next year. You know, you kind of see the humor and the drama that's inherent in the Doctor Who concept, and you really get really good characters in this. I mean, Russell knows how to write people that we care about and give them realistic motivations rather than just having them kind of be there or stand around or point out the obvious or things that do not make good characters. So I think if this were my first episode, I think I would be very excited, especially if I were a mid-teen. I mean, it's hard for me to remember back that far, but it feels like it's a very youthful, energetic kind of show watching this first episode.
It is very much brand new. As we understand, we're going to be catering to try to bring new people in and act like this is where a new, like when they restart comics, when it's like new Spider-Man #1, whatever it is, meant to be like for Doctor Who. I think some people aren't aware of that, or some have heard are just in denial. But the thing is that if what came before while the canon exists, it's not wedded to that, and this is something brand new. So it's like, but Doctor Who had this, or this Doctor did this. It don't matter. It doesn't matter. Forget it. Older fans are going to have to let that shit go, which I'm sure will be an ongoing part of Doctor Who discourse over the next few years. What from this I did like the most was the Foster family, the Sundays. My reasoning, a very subjective and actually very personal to me, why I particularly vibed with this new family was saying, like you say, Chris was very good at writing characters that we care about, and sometimes secondary characters that we care about, and he has done a very good job in the past of writing families, found families sometimes, but what he's never done is written a black family like this. So it was very, like, to a point where I was wondering whether he was getting some help from people, because the mother and the grandmother, Kyla and Cherry, the way they oscillated so easily between English and then Jamaican patois.
Walk on.
Can't get a cup of tea around here, but I love large money.
We get you a packet of humbugs, like Scrooge. It's the season.
Which is a very accurate representation of Caribbean households. I really like the allusion to London cost of living, in terms of them being able to afford to still being in Notting Hill. And even stuff like, so they've got the ongoing motif of Cherry wants a cup of tea. And at one point Carla says, you let the last one go cold. That is so accurate to my own grandmother that it was kind of scary. I mean, she, in a way, was a bit of a scene stealer. When Cherry meets the Doctor, and said, last time I met a doctor, he tried to murder me. It is also that thing which you find with black people everywhere, of black people don't tend to trust doctors. Like our history with medicine, while why I'm not telling people to not trust doctors, black people, particularly older black people's history of medicine isn't always the best. So it was those little touches like that made this family, and it's not as if they're in the episode for most of it. I mean, I haven't counted, but their screen time probably doesn't go beyond like maybe 17, 18 minutes, if that. But they came out the box so fully formed and fully three-dimensional, and felt very much, even though they're Russian actors, they felt so much, these fictional characters, like real people so quickly. And I've never seen him write a black family like this. It's obviously heartening to see it on such a mainstream show, particularly on Christmas Day, when that's a time when lots of people who don't watch Doctor Who don't really bother, just will, because it's on, you know, the whole family's together, one person chooses what to watch. Or one of the kids or the grandkids is demanding Doctor Who, and everyone's like, they're too full from turkey to argue, so they're like, alright, fine, whatever. So you've got people being exposed to this type of British family in a way they might not otherwise, and they might reach for the remote and change the channel. And when you have that, I find it personally gratifying to seeing it depicted as well as it was. It was depicted with such precision, also the nature of it. And I think most of us knew ahead of time that Ruby was adopted. I didn't know until quite late on that the family that adopted her was black, and usually we see it in TV. I mean, even think of like Different Strokes. Usually the trope is the kid who had a tough upbringing or in wrong side of the tracks, and they become drawn into usually a affluent family, and that affluent family is usually white. And also it's a trope based, I'm sure that's real life experience, I'm sure that's the most common, but it was very notable that we are seeing the stable family in this world being a black family, and the person it's inclusive of is a white person, when it usually be the other way around. I suspect, also a word to Mark Tonderai, who's the director, he's also black. I think he's the only black director the show's ever had. I'm sure certain bits of the very subtle cultural touches were probably helped by him. I can't imagine that's an accident.
As somebody who likes audience scholarship, I always like to hear about people connecting to programs. The other really great thing about that was just how central that was to the whole plot. I've read some complaints online, and you should never go too deep into that wormhole, but some people were saying like nothing happened, and it's like, oh, incredible things were happening. This family was erased at some point because of these nasty little creatures. That really powerful scene there, after the goblins have been there, after we think they've left the house, when in fact they've really taken Ruby away. And then we get this sort of other Carla, right? This sort of like Carla that's not excited and not loving and not caring. And Cherry, who is just sort of half dead in the bed, just laying there.
Your daughter?
I told you, this is Lulu. And she's a right old pain on Christmas Eve. Last thing I need.
remember Ruby?
What you talking about?
Your granddaughter is called Ruby.
There is no bikini in this home. We were never so blessed.
And that contrast is so painful and so harsh. And then you get that absolutely amazing scene between Carla and the doctor.
Why would I want a daughter when I'm happy as I am?
Then why are you crying?
I don't know. Why are you?
That's one of the things I've always loved about Russell T Davies is he's got this knack for just taking incredibly big ideas and playing them right down here, in this case, in somebody's house, right? In somebody's apartment, in somebody's flat. It's just so wild. That made you just love those characters. You know, I hope we're back. I hope we see them all the time. I hope we run into them quite a bit. I loved Jackie Tyler. Jackie Tyler was great too, but the bonds here just seem a little tighter, and I really want to see them explored.
Yeah, one criticism I saw online, and it was fair-minded, but I disagreed, was they weren't as wild about the episode, and they said basically the family's too solid, and there's not enough irritation between them, so that there's no drama because everyone in the family gets on fine. I think that's by design, and obviously because they do get on fine, it then highlights what it does when Ruby is removed from history. I mean, a point on that, and it is a pity that in America apparently you're not getting any of this stuff at all, and I kind of don't really get why, but on the episode commentary of this episode, Russell T Davies was on the episode commentary, and he mentioned that.
But your last words to your mother there are "don't move," so she never moves. It's like some part of her brain, Carla's brain, heard that in the timeline without Ruby. So because we discover where she's now alone, but she never left this flat. She never did anything with herself. She never fostered much. So Ruby's words somehow got through to her, and that's how she lived her life.
Oh,
I like that point.
I love that point.
Yeah, I should have maybe pointed out to you at the time.
Yeah. Nice.
instead of a year later.
But by the way,
It's fine.
I mean, what I'll have to do, I will have to try and put these on our Instagram, Analyzing DW on Insta. But I'll have to kind of get these clips and put them on Instagram because I find them, whether people like the episodes or not, very interesting when you see what was going through RTD's mind when he was, when these episodes are coming together. Incredibly enough, like, I think this Black family has resonated more after one episode than the entirety of the last Black family he wrote, which was Martha's. One or two things I liked in there, but that Black family was nowhere, as to be fair, same with Martha, and that's to do with the writing, was nowhere near as effective in terms of how it was assembled than this one after one episode. That's also heartening that whatever problems we have with Russell's style, that in some areas he clearly has, unsurprisingly, it's been for quite a few years, he's improved. He's gotten better as a writer. He's spotted things that maybe he wasn't as strong on and has endeavoured to try and improve them, which is just positive for the future of the show. And also, it's not just in London, this family, but it's Notting Hill, which not everyone will know, but that is a very important area. It's a critical area as far as Black British history goes, because that's the home of the Notting Hill Carnival, which is the biggest street party in Europe. I'm not sure about the world, but it's definitely in Europe, and it's grown into a big kind of mass celebration of Black culture, particularly Caribbean culture, in the kind of last Monday of August every year, and it's a huge event. So the idea that, again, a Black family situated there feels very deliberate, despite the fact it has been heavily gentrified, which is like the whole point about the rent controls. The last bit of like fixed rent was why we could afford to live here, why we're not moving. That was again another nice touch, because otherwise you might think, could they afford to live there now? Even though it's an area that culturally is very heavily associated with Black people. It's kind of why because you know the film Notting Hill, the romantic comedy with Julia Roberts and Hugh Grant,
right?
Yeah, like Lenny Henry, who was in the Spyfall two-parter. Lenny Henry once said that the best joke in all of Notting Hill is that you've got a film called Notting Hill and not a single Black person in it. Which is like if someone in America made like a romantic comedy called Atlanta and it just had white people.
when we're talking about families, I mean, Doctor Who fans have a very complicated relationship with the families that we see on the show. I mean, some fans say, why do we see Rose Tyler's family? It turns it into a soap opera, blah, blah, blah. And then other fans say, why do we only see Clara's dad and stepmother in one episode? They should have been in other episodes. Why did we only see them one time? So there's some conflict there about how much should really be about the families and how they contribute to the drama. I mean, I always like it because in the classic series, you never saw anybody's family almost. Very rarely, like Tegan had an uncle, I think, and had an aunt who died or her grandfather, but you rarely saw families like on a long-term recurring kind of basis, So it's just interesting to me. It kind of grounds them in the real world for a while, but there's different ideas about whether that's a good thing to have in the show or not. I think it's great. Other people seem to think that families distract from the whiz-bang action parts of the show, which is an interesting perspective for me that I don't agree with. I mean, obviously you can go too far and make a whole episode about the family and nothing happens, but I don't think that's going to happen in this show with this family.
Yeah, I'm also a fan of it. I think it adds more depth to the storyline. It broadens the appeal of who you're likely to bring in, because some people might like the family stuff, some people might like the more, the adventures and whatever. But as far as the thing with Doctor Who and families goes, again, if that's not your thing, then Doctor Who might not be for you, because the very first incarnation of the show, what was Barbara, Ian, Susan and the Doctor? But a family. Not a literal blood one in many cases, but that's a family dynamic. So as far as I'm concerned, the idea of family in Doctor Who goes all the way back to its roots. So Chris, if I ask you what from this episode you like the least?
I felt like they should have done more with the goblins. I mean, they have the big musical number, they're kind of sneaking around in the background, but it feels like they're talked about more than you actually see them. Now, that might be a case of having the money to show the goblins for a longer period of time in the show, but especially during the resolution of the episode, I feel like we don't really see them as much as we could or we should. Maybe they're going to return in the upcoming season when they resolve the plot line about Ruby. That's possible. Maybe they're saving that for the future, but I felt like I didn't time the amount of time that the goblins were on the screen, but it felt like out of an hour, it didn't feel like there was enough goblin time, considering that's how we were promoting the episode, like in the previews and things. That's kind of what I came away with it.
That's funny. My son hates the song because we played it here too much. I kept playing it over and over. And so if you asked him, he'd be like, no, there was too much goblins. I agree that they really didn't get used a lot. I kind of thought it might be money as well, that once you've built a couple costumes, CGI'd a bunch of things, and made a great big old Goblin King, there wasn't a lot of space for running around. But they're sneaky. I like that. They're a lot of fun. My only real complaint is sort of related to that. I think that Ruby gets a great introduction. I'm not entirely sure Ruby gets to do something truly decisive here. She runs up onto the roof. She chases after the baby. That's very heroic. That's amazing. That's incredible. But I think towards the very end, because of the nature of her background, she gets sidelined, right? She gets kidnapped. She's a baby. She can't have a lot of agency in solving the plot. It's not the strongest comparison in the world, but when we first meet Rose Tyler, Rose gets to at least swing around on a chain, and do something to the Nestine consciousness. And I don't think that's really a flaw in the character. I think it's just something that had to happen with the episode. But I want to see her. I think she's got a lot of capacity to really push forward, really kind of carry things. And I want to see that. And she's got some bigger capabilities. So maybe, if I've got one complaint, she maybe doesn't quite get served because she's literally raised there and literally has to be rescued. So that's probably my only complaint. But it's not a huge complaint.
Yeah, well, we'll talk more on Ruby and Millie Gibson later. Like, my least was actually the specific scene that Chris has alluded to, the moment of stopping the goblins, the resolution of it, because it's an action scene, the conclusion of the narrative, and I didn't find the directing and I think the editing as well very smooth. So what I mean, it wasn't kind of clear specifically visually what was happening. So I wasn't sure when Shooty grabs the ladder, Was he trying to climb the ladder, which is what at first he was assuming to do, or was he trying to use the power of the gloves to pull the ship down? I wasn't entirely sure exactly what was happening, and obviously you don't know, then you're not in line with the moment in question, and you're not sure like what exactly is happening, rather than being dragged into the tension of, is he going to get to Ruby in time before she's eaten? And then even with the conclusion where he kind of jumps off the roof of the church and then uses that momentum to pull the ship down and kind of put it through the steeple and then kill the Goblin King. Like, I was like, hold on, when did he get up there? And that kind of stuff wasn't clear in how they cut the scene together. I suspect that was probably a real, not rush job, but that probably was a difficult sequence to film. And even just some reference to, like, there was a reference early in the episode to, I've only got 3% left in the gloves. If we had a reference to that in that scene, that again increases, like a countdown when you're trying to, like, when someone's trying to defuse a bomb in a movie or whatever, you always get shots of the clock to increase the drama and increase the tension in the moment. If we'd have known, like, how much percentage was left, that also, I think, would have been beneficial to the scene, and it just failed to make the scene as dramatic as it should have been. I agree that the Goblins didn't do much, but it didn't take away too much just because I'm previously experienced the Christmas episodes. Like, what's your favourite villain from the Christmas episodes? They're never memorable. They're very basic. They're often dispatched quite easily, and I think that comes down to what I was saying earlier about these episodes aren't for the people like us. Like, they want us to watch, and they want to make it enjoyable for everyone, but in a way, they're kind of like entry-level Doctor Who. They're trying to grab some people who are watching just to turn it on and then trying to keep them for the start of the new series. And I think that's why villains, you don't get none of the big villains really, and they don't tend to be the most dramatic or difficult adversary like the Doctor's ever faced. So with the Goblins, the Goblins aren't memorable that much as villains, but I think that's just because it's Christmas. It's a Christmas villain, almost rather than a proper villain. All that said, of course, I also did have that annoying song in my head for about a week. Like, it worked. It worked for what it was trying to do. It is by no means a good song. It fits in that very British tradition of deliberately bad novelty songs, and it did really well in the charts. It was threatening to be like the Christmas #1 for a little while. But yes, that annoying song, was in my head for ages. And now it will be the same for everyone else, because I will take the song and I will splice it into this part of the podcast.
Black hair, circus clowns with a red balloon.
He can eat me. He makes me swoon.
I'm back before a king on high. Oh little baby, say
goodbye. That's cruel, Shane. That's very cruel.
But it works for what it had to do, for the silliness of that scene, and then the impromptu musical bit of then the Doctor and Ruby also singing along.
My son sighed at that part, but I loved it. That was a neat moment for this new Doctor. It really kind of emphasized, he talks a lot in this episode, about learning vocabulary, learning the rules, trying to figure things out. I thought that was really a fun spin when he started singing again. And in a neat sort of way, it's your little Buffy the musical moment without having to give the whole episode over to a musical. I don't know if I would ever want that to happen. I've enjoyed other versions of that. I know there's that really fun Big Finish Doctor Who and the Pirates or something like that has a lot of singing built into it. I don't think I'd ever want a whole all singing episode of Doctor Who, but the fact that the Doctor just sort of launched right into it, and it's a fun scene to go back and rewatch, because the whole time he's doing it, he's still looking around, he's still watching the ropes above him, he's still playing the whole room. Play on, I guess. I'll listen to that song forever.
That actually is very Doctor, that moment of the Doctor just trying to buy time and figuring it out on the fly, which is what we're used to seeing the Doctor always do. And speaking of the Doctor, we have fully in place now our new Doctor. So your thoughts on the 15th Doctor in this, please, Chris?
My thoughts are pretty much what almost everybody's thoughts are that I'm seeing online. I mean, he's got tons of charisma. He's got none of the angst. I mean, we clearly feel like we've solved that angst problem in the giggle and reset everything. So we're kind of back to almost where we were in the classic series, that the Doctor is very sort of an adventurer who doesn't really have much of a past or doesn't really think much about the past. And it will be interesting to see how long Russell T or future showrunners even will be able to keep that going. Although angst is something that all of us deal with, it's also a way to have a lot of plot drama as well. So how long are they going to be able to keep him angst-free? Or are they going to have to introduce a new kind of angst to have some kind of drama with the companion? Or are we just going to be, the happy-go-lucky doctor from here on in? Like, it'll be interesting to see. I don't have any predictions on that, but I have a feeling that at some point we're going to build up more reasons for angst. And what those reasons are, I don't know, but I think it's kind of inevitable because it's a drama after all, and that's one of the ways to have a drama in a show like this, is to kind of have conflict, inner conflict, and conflict between the doctor and the companion, or the doctor and the guest characters, or anything like that. But, he's great. You kind of knew that even before you saw him on screen in interviews and things like that. He just projects a happiness, He projects a very charismatic, happy kind of persona. And clearly Russell T has written that persona into the show, just like past doctors have had their kind of personal personas a lot of times written into the show. So I think that's a good way to go.
Yeah, it has been said that the trauma of previous doctors have been left behind, but I think Russell said that this doctor's still going to have their problems. Mike, if I bring you in on the 15th.
So much enthusiasm, so much excitement, so much wonder. I'm an academic. I got to do my homework. So about an hour and a half before this, I was rewatching it again. And I was watching those scenes. He's looking around. He's excited. He's thrilled. He's interested. Sometimes that's a little frightening, a little alien, right? Which is something that we've always had with Doctor Who. But I don't think he ever lost his ability to understand the situation or what was going on. But Ncuti Gatwa, just the enthusiasm just rolls off of him. He's so excited to be there. You can tell he's having a blast. And you see that a lot in the materials that we released. Obviously, they're never going to release a thing where some actor's really mad, like, oh, here's so-and-so, they really hate their job today. But he really is coming across like a lot of other doctors as just really excited to be there, which is one of the things that I really, really like. I think the other thing that was really kind of interesting is, because of the circumstances of this bi-regeneration, we never really had, I don't know what the term for it is, but there's sort of always this sort of post-regenerative confusion, right? Or disorientation. So maybe only Christopher Eccleston has appeared without any of that, who am I? What costume am I going to wear? I think Eccleston makes a little reference to his ears or something in Rose. And it's not something that I'm saying they should do away with. I love it. I always enjoy that part of it. But it's interesting to me that he's sort of is who he is almost from the get-go, almost from the moment he first arrives and gets moving. And in this episode, he's ready to go. He's not confused about who he is. He's not uncertain about what his job is. There's that hint of maybe a little sadness or concern about who his family really is, right? He mentions being adopted in that one scene as the coincidences are piling up. But by and large, he's really, really great. One of the scenes that I really enjoyed was, after Ruby comes up on the roof and gets caught on the ladder. And, again, this is so Russell T Davies. There's people swinging on ladders and people falling from heights. That's always happening in Russell T Davies episodes. But that really great scene where he is just running along that rooftop the whole time talking, the whole time hurdling things. And there's no reason that scene has to be that way, other than it's really cool and it really conveys this kind of sense of who this character is going to be. So I just can't wait to see more. I am just absolutely thrilled to have this. He feels very fresh and new and young and thrilling and exciting, and that is just fantastic.
One word that I think you used a bit is enthusiasm, and that's definitely, I think, appropriate for how he's playing it so far, and energy as well. So much energy, a lot of personality he's giving to it. He hasn't, and I've said this, and I'll say this probably quite a bit over the next few months. Give him a year to actually understand how to speak the language of the Doctor. No one learns, no one is fluent immediately, and it's the same with every, I think, one of his predecessors. right now he's just carrying it through his ability as an actor. But eventually he will know how to be his version of the Doctor. And you won't be able to imagine anyone else playing this part. Look at Capaldi's first year and then look after it. Look at Smith and then after it. Tennant and then after it. As the 10th. By the 14th, he had it down by then. Everyone usually needs around a year before it's like, oh, yeah, they've got it. Like, they were fine. I was enjoying watching them, but now they've got it and they've got this version of the character perfect. He doesn't yet. Of course he doesn't. He's done 1.5 episodes, so we can't expect unreasonable things from him. But because of his energy and his personality and presence, he's still incredibly watchable, and no one's having any problem with him riding this bike even though the training wheels are still on. He's more already openly emotional than we're used to seeing Doctors. In a way, Tennant as 14, who seemed more emotional, tactile, that might have been a deliberate bridge. The more I think about it, the more that might have been a deliberate note to Tennant. Can you just play this one a little, like, in some ways really human, because that's how Shooty's going to do it. And just so the transition doesn't jar and the transition between 14 and 15 feels quite smooth, particularly as you say, Mike, there is no regeneration, maybe because it's a bi rather than a re. There is no disorientation or total incongruous behaviour, which is what you're used to seeing with the Doctor, usually in like their first episode. Definitely, he said he will be more energetic. He may be the closest thing we've seen to like an action hero Doctor since like the third, even though I think maybe more running than fighting. So we've already seen the running on the roof scene. Like even how he was jumping with his just posture just perfect. That's the kind of thing we're not used to associating with Doctors. And this didn't make the final episode, but in the Giggle, when he appears, when they have the game against the Toymaker, the catch game, and they did many different versions of catching a ball, one thing Shooty did that didn't make the final edit was that he did a cartwheel. He did a one-handed cartwheel into then catching the ball. And that was his idea. He said, I'll do a cartwheel. You can find it online on YouTube. You see him do it, and it's like I'm not a gymnastics judge, but that it seemed almost gymnastically quite perfect. So I think they will be like, oh, we can do this with him, and we can ask him to do these things, and we can almost not force him, but he can contort himself into ways, and we can like stuff we would never ask Peter Capaldi to do, for example. We can ask Shooty to do, and he'll be able to do that. He feels a little, or he may come off as like a little bit Indiana Jones. Because the thing about like Indy, I mean, Indy did have fight scenes, but Indy was never the best fighter. His skill was more evasion, running and escaping and finding ways out of situations where he looks perfectly trapped. But like Indy gets caught a lot and doesn't win every fight he's in, and there may be elements of that with this Doctor. And I know that this is part of the reason I think the gloves have come in, by the way. That Davis, and I remember this going back to his first time on the show, Tennant said that Russell loves writing scenes where characters are like descending or going down a building of some kind, and I didn't realise that until you watch him back and you realise he does actually have a penchant for that quite a bit. And so because of that, if there's going to be a bit of falling and climbing and clambering, the idea that the Doctor would invent these gloves does actually kind of make sense, because it gives you more scope to write these scenes, and it stops people asking, like, you know, the Doctor might be able to hang on to something for like 5 minutes without people asking, how could anyone hang on for like 5 minutes? They lose their grip eventually. That's, I suspect that's why the gloves will come in. And I also suspect that this version, this slightly more demonstrative emotionally and action hero style Doctor, will annoy quite a few fans, particularly some of the older fans. And I would expect a lot of exhausting discourse about how much criticism of this Doctor is just valid criticism because it's personal taste, and how much of it is motivated by like racism and anti-blackness. That is, I'm sure, going to be a lot of fun. Just like we had with, with the Jodie era. How much of it, because the show wasn't good, how much of it is sexist and people having a pretext to throw criticism at Jodie. I'm sure people will use things like that for complaints about how this isn't a proper Doctor, the Doctor's not like this, and on will go, I'm sure.
This is what Shooty, this is the newest thing he brings to the Doctor, I think, which is to be so emotional.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Oh, it's amazing.
I do.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Because he plays it so well, because it's almost like someone's inside of him fighting those emotions through, and he's trying to hold them back. And
yes.
It's his humanity.
So it's like he's crying independently of his thought process.
Yeah. And it's like, no, what am I doing?
Yeah. I was arguing with the writer the other day. It was kind of going, not arguing, but with the writer saying the Doctor wouldn't do that. And I was going, no, this Doctor does.
Yeah.
Look at him. It's like he's so much more full of, and I love it.
Yeah.
So moving from the new Doctor to the new companion, it was our first look at a new companion, Ruby Sunday. Mike, if I come to you first on your thoughts about Ruby.
I really like Ruby a lot. Obviously, people are going to say it. There's a lot of similarity to Rose. And I think that's surface. I think you spoke earlier about how they carefully constructed Ruby's family, and there was discussion of how can anybody afford to live in London anymore, and how is this family here, thanks to rent control. So you've got another character that is a bit like Rose in that she's representing what one would assume would be a more common experience, right? And I always enjoy when that's there. I'm a Maryland boy, grew up in Maryland. Perry Brown is great, but the other day there was a reference, I think it's in one of the Tales episodes, where Perry says something about, this girl from Fells Point, and it's like, wow, I never really felt like you were from anywhere around Baltimore. Like, it's great that you did those things, but Perry, she's supposed to be my age. She's supposed to kind of reflect that experience. That was not always there in her in the beginning. So it's really great that they, not that they could do that work or thought of doing that work back then or were afraid to do that work, but it's really great that that work was put in there. I think what's really fun about Ruby is that she is very creative. Not anybody can jump up and sing a song. She is very protective. She goes right up out that skylight, right onto the roof, right onto that ladder. That's what I was saying earlier. I want to see her do more things. I don't think she's going to be action companion, right? She's not going to be Ace, and that's fine. But I really like that about her. I really like this backstory for her. I'm very curious about it. I really wonder what is going on and what happened and who is the mysterious person that dropped her off. And I'm really spending a lot of time on my brain trying to figure out who Mrs. Flood is and what she knows about anybody. So I'm desperately trying to connect those things up when they probably have no connection. But I think that's really interesting. I think she has a really fascinating potential origin story. When handled well, a character with a mysterious past can be a lot of fun. So I really enjoy that about her. And I think she's just going to be a perfect match here. Again, nobody's going to show a video where Millie and Shooty aren't getting along, but they really seem to genuinely enjoy each other.
Where were you when you found out you got the role?
I just had a spray tan.
Come on, priorities.
Exactly.
Priorities.
Exactly. And my agents were like, where are you? And I was like, I've just had a spray tan and I'm trying not to cry it off.
Do you know I love that? Because I was going into the barber shop when I found out that.
No! See?
We're right there.
And that's great. That's fantastic. I'm sure it's always that way, but their connection is really, really strong. So I'm really excited about seeing the two of them together. Normally, I want companions to go off on their own and get in trouble and then kind of come back. But I would really love to see these two stick around a lot and play off of each other.
Okay, Chris, if I come to you on Ruby.
I agree with what Mike said, and I just want to add that she seems like a cross, at least initially, between Rose Tyler and Clara Oswald. I mean, even in appearance-wise, you could kind of see both of them in that character, and clearly she shares some mystery about her origins the same way that Clara did when we first met her. And I also agree with Mike that we haven't really seen her full potential yet. Like, she did some cool, interesting things, but it seems like in this episode, a lot of them were more reactive than proactive in terms of trying to jump on the roof, save the baby, that kind of thing. It would be interesting to see when she kind of gets into the groove of traveling with the doctor, how she will be more proactive, taking on different aspects of the adventures herself rather than being reactive or waiting for a cue from the doctor in order to act in a certain way that will save the day and make things better. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the whole mystery of her origins unfolds. Are we going to learn who her parents are? Are we going to learn who Mrs. Flood is? That's a totally different story. But it'll depend on how it all unfolds, I think, about how we, in the future, will look back on Ruby and understand her more, sort of like Clara. In the beginning, there were all these theories about what Clara's whole story was. How soon until we learn what's up with Ruby, what her real story is, how they handle it, and how they handle the character after that, presuming that we don't find out what her story is, and then she immediately leaves, which doesn't seem to be the plan, but they're obviously keeping it very under wraps at the moment. I mean, we'll learn it when we get there.
Chris, you don't have to say some. If you want me to say anti-Clara things, you could just argue against me.
Yeah, that might be a whole other side podcast, Mike.
Well, we have time before the next series and time after the next series, definitely to do a Clara special. There's definitely plenty to talk about there. Ruby Sunday, I like her already. Like I said about the family, she felt fully formed, almost from her first scene. And for that, I checked the episode. For the first 19 minutes, it's almost the Ruby show. In that way, there is comparison between her and Rose in the episode Rose. It is pretty much Ruby. You get a couple of appearances from the Doctor. He's actually not in it much.
It's interesting to note that there would have been even less of the Doctor, as we found out later, if Disney had not suggested to put in an extra scene where the Doctor's in it, because the Doctor just wasn't in it enough for the first 20 minutes.
Well, I remember hearing months ago that Davis said in an interview that Disney gave him a note, and he said it was a good note, and we listened to it. And there was, and I think there will be plenty of this over the next few months and beyond, of people from this side of the pond in particular, hand-wringing that Disney are poking their nose in and they're ruining this show. And Disney are trying to Disneyfy, as in ruin this show and make it all Disney and make it all, I mean, which is this case, Disney is basically another way of saying American, because of that one thing. They said, yeah, they gave us a note, we thought it was a good note, and we reacted accordingly. This is the note he was referring to. I know we've already spoken about Shooty, but that scene is actually my favourite scenes.
Now I'm gonna have to report this.
Okay. Name, the Doctor. Occupation, not a doctor. Current status, just passing by. Employer, myself. Address, that blue box over there. Now, if you don't mind, I just got snowman, and I would like to go home.
All of that stuff was a late addition, and I remember even the bit with the massive snowman falling off the building. I remember seeing, because you know, all the exterior shots now, fans are showing up and filming it on their phones and putting it on social media. So every now and then you're catching a little bit without any context. And I remember seeing that bit of Shooty shouting at the woman to get back, and then popping his head out of an inflatable massive snowman. That actually was quite recent, a few months ago, when the episode was filmed a lot longer back, and this was a pickup shot. They just added this because they added the scene because of the Disney note. Even if the scene wasn't for you, I don't think anyone thinks it made the episode worse. It doesn't mean every note Disney will give will be good, and it doesn't mean every note Disney gives will be agreed to. Some might be straight up ignored. But it's not in Disney's interest to make the show bad. It's not in anyone's interest working on the show. So maybe we calm down and judge Disney on what they do rather than what we would assume they would do. But back to Ruby, it is basically the Ruby show for around 19 minutes. The thing that's always a key for me in anything I watch really is the performances. If the performances are good, then you've always got me engaged. The acting just has to be good, aside from anything else. And I really love Millie Gibson's work when she gets called by Davina McCall, and the show that she's doing, you know, the fictional version of the show she's presenting in this episode is a real show, and that's what Davis has gave him the idea for Ruby's story. That is a real show, even though they weren't allowed to use the title because it's sort of rival network. But that show she does about reuniting people with their adopted people, foster people with their biological families, that's a real show we do have over here, and was the inspiration for Ruby's story. And so when Davina McCall calls her and says, we've got no trace of your family, if you watch Millie Gibson's reaction, because you can see she's totally cut to the core but trying to keep it together, there's like a halting breath at one moment. And in the opening scene with Davina McCall, Ruby talks of being a little bit stranded, which I'm sure is something, in fact, I think it's very safe to assume that we will be getting more into that and delving more into that. Davis himself has alluded to that point. And an interesting thing as well about Ruby is, and why she maybe fit as a companion, is that she comes from a not biological family, but she does come from a big family of lots of foster brothers and sisters. And in a way, the Doctor is kind of the latest parental figure. The Doctor often does The Doctor often does fulfill a role that the companion is missing in their life, and what that role is can vary from Doctor to Doctor, companion to companion. But it's often the role the Doctor fills, and it looks like the Doctor will fulfill a familial figure in some way over their time together. Again, to underscore this point, Dave has spoken about Ruby being all, I think, complicated and knotted and vivid, I think are the words he used. So that definitely, there's some faint Clara Oswald echoes there, but it does feel, no matter what, that her getting in that TARDIS on Mrs. Flood's encouragement could be the start of her being drawn into something big that she's not ready for. To the point you made earlier, Mike, about what it does to the Sundays when she disappears. Another trope that Davis loves is that it underlines that Ruby's absence shows how every person matters. How Ruby hasn't done anything exceptional in life, but you see what her absence does to the lives of Carla and the lives of Cherry. It has a profoundly negative effect on both of them. I assume, we're all assuming, that whoever that person was that dropped Ruby off at the church, we'll see them again. But I have nothing but just glowingly positive things to say. I thought the performance felt so brilliantly textured and layered. After one episode, I see exactly all the stuff we were hearing about. Like you said, they're not going to show a video of Shooty and really not getting on, but all the stuff we've heard, like Shooty saying after they did the chemistry read and then she left, Shooty saying, her, yeah, like it is going to be her, yeah, like definitely her. And yeah, she and Shooty does such great chemistry already. There's like a bit when they've come back from the Goblin ship and Carla's come back. They're not going to tell her that, yeah, we were just on a Goblin ship and Lulu almost got eaten. But there's moments when Carla's just rushing around and they're looking at each other and kind of not angry with each other, but arguing about, why'd you say that? Why'd you say that? I didn't say that. And it's just cutting back to them, of them arguing. And then they put on a normal face once Carla's looking at them. That wasn't in the script. That was just them two. And that's really positive sign for what the other episodes will get when they interact together. When actors are interacting in that very real way and not just saying words they've learned on a bit of paper. The characters, I think, become a lot more three-dimensional, that they stick in your mind and they feel like real people. So everything I've seen from this, from Ruby and Shooty and Ruby herself, I think is to be very encouraged for the future. So, Chris, just if we move on to any additional observations and any things we haven't mentioned yet.
Who are Ruby's parents? I suppose we're going to figure that out. I have a theory that her parents are Rose and the Metacrisis doctor. That's just me. That would be Russell T's way to get Billy Piper back on the show, which he seems to love to do. That's just my theory. Who is Mrs. Flood? Don't know. Lots of theories out there. Who fixes the Sunday's apartment on Christmas? Like, that's what I want to know. Who fixes the giant crack? I mean, they're definitely going to lose their deposit. And one of the things that I wanted to mention is, maybe it's just me, but can we please drop the whole Mavity thing? It wasn't that funny to begin with, and the fact that we keep doing it is just less funny every time they mention it. Maybe it's just me. Maybe you guys have a different opinion, but that's just the way I think about it. So, we could do a whole other hour talking about all the random seeds for future episodes that clearly are also being planted in these specials and in this Christmas episode for future seasons. Some of them we'll see again. Some of them maybe will get dropped. It'll be interesting to see which ones they are.
I'll bring you in a second, Mike, but I did note the Mavity thing, which that is a thing. It wasn't a one-off joke in Wild Blue Yonder. It's getting used so much, I don't think it's just been used as a throwaway joke. I think it is going somewhere, which we will, maybe not till the end of the next series. So I think we will see it more on Mavity, because it's happened 3 times now. I think it's 3 times in 3 straight episodes.
At least 3, maybe. Yeah. Maybe I'm just being a grouch here, but I just didn't think it was very funny to begin with. And the fact that we keep doing it is just, every time I kind of flinch a little bit, where I'm like, I don't know, like, why do we keep going back in this show? Because if you didn't see Wild Blue Yonder and you're starting with this episode, you have no idea why they're saying it that way. Like, I feel like if you want it to be a jumping off point, you need to make it a jumping off point, and people will be confused if they start here. Why is he saying Mavity? I have no idea. So maybe that's part of it too.
Yeah, I will say that in its defense, because the first time it's used in a very deliberate way. This version of Isaac Newton says Mavity instead of gravity, where the other 2 times it was used, so in Giggle and here, I didn't notice it. And I only noticed it when people were pointing out later and, using closed captioning, pointing out that it is clearly, he does say Mavity. But truth be told, I didn't notice it at all. It's a very curious thing because we kind of know what it means, I guess. So I don't know how many people maybe even clocked. So I wonder if that's Russell just slightly playing with, you kind of know what he means. And he's saying it like the second and third time that it's said as part of a bigger speech, said very quickly. So almost your brain corrects it. I don't think that's an accident. And the whole Mavity thing, I know we're going somewhere. Okay, Mike, any observations that we've missed?
Well, first of all, I'm confused. Hasn't it always been Mavity? I checked my physics books and it says Mavity.
Oh, Mike. Stop, Mike.
In the world we're in.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's always been Mavity. Just imagine all the science teachers who now have to deal with kids going, Mr. Brown, isn't it Mavity? That'll be awesome. So I'm one of these people where you get the future trailers and you slow down, like you just try to catch a glimpse of something for a tenth of a second. Well, I swear something in there looks like a tractator, and I don't know if it is a tractator. So the ultimate test is if that's a tractator and the tractators are talking about gravity and everybody else is talking about mavity, that's how we'll know. But yeah, flogging a horse there. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm very fascinated by Mrs. Flood. That moment when she breaks the fourth wall, I tried to convince myself that it hadn't happened, and I went back and rewatched it. We had William Hartnell do that, writing a Christmas episode, and then you can make an argument. I'd love to show Blink to my media criticism students, and then really wig them out by pointing out that it's us seeing the angels that are stopping the angels from doing things in certain episodes. So there have been a few times where somehow that fourth wall is being broken. So I'm very intrigued as to what's going on there. If she hadn't looked out of the screen like that, I would have assumed, they'll go back in time at some point. They'll go back to the 60s or the 70s or something, and they'll run into Mrs. Flood, and we'll find out, this is young Mrs. Flood, and she's done these exciting things. Now I'm not sure what they make of it. When she knows what a TARDIS is and when she clearly talks to us, I think that's really fascinating. That's really just got me thrilled. And then I'm really, really thrilled by the intensity that all of this is coming out. They are not letting any break happen here. We've had 3 great episodes, a great Christmas episode. We're only supposed to wait until the springtime. That's fantastic. In a time when we've been trained to kind of go, let's wait a year. Here are some Sea Devils, and then let's wait a whole year. I know why these things happen, and I know why they occur, and I know COVID made things even more challenging in that particular example. But I just like that the throttle is down. I like that this franchise, after 60 years, is still humming along like a well-tuned sports car. It's not a good analogy because I don't think there's a single driver of it, but the pedal is down, and I really feel like we are about to see some world-class Doctor Who, and that to me is stunning. For 6 decades, that's amazing. I am just really thrilled to see what happens. My mom is excited about Doctor Who again, and I've spent much of my life trying to get my mom interested in Doctor Who, and it never always worked. She started liking the Eccleston and the Tennant era. She drifted away. She is now thoroughly excited about all this stuff again. That's got me hopeful that people are coming back to the show, that we're going to have a lot of fun. I do understand the Disney worries that you were mentioning earlier. Disney is always the elephant in the room, right, or the mouse in the room. The possibilities are great, and I'm very excited about that, and I'm very hopeful. And I think with Russell T. Davies involved, I'd be really scared if somebody else was involved. But with Russell T. Davies running the show, I think we're in a really great place.
In terms of the Disney thing, I just want to say, it seems like, as Shane said, Disney is welcome to give notes, but it seems like Russell is the one who is firmly in charge of this whole thing. He can take the notes, he can not take the notes, unless some other information comes out. That seems to be the impression that Russell gives in interviews, and, the impression that I get is they're not really influencing it as much as some of the naysayers might think that they are.
Well, and all of this is just symptomatic of who's driving the car right now. It's not much more complicated than that. Doctor Who is a sports team with a winning coach, again, which is why there's a lot more optimism. Just little things. I mean, going back to some of the themes and where this might be going, when Lulu is dropped off, and with the social worker, and there's just a line of, what happened to the mum? And it's very casual. It's just like, just can't cope. That family's too complicated for words. Maybe it's nothing, but just because of some of the themes that came up in this episode and that we imagine will be continued to extend to do with family, found family, where's your real family, who's your real family, a line like that, again, might have a bit more weight to it than just a throwaway line. Maybe not, we'll see. It's like it's a minor criticism, but the scene when Ruby disappears and the Doctor is asking Carla, like, where's Ruby? Ruby, your daughter, and speaks to Cherry as well. At no point do Carla and Cherry kind of ask, because we're assuming in this timeline they've never met the Doctor, so at no point they kind of ask who the Doctor is, like, who are you? How are you in my home? Why are you asking me all these questions? That just felt kind of odd. Did none of them go, hold up, who the fuck are you? What, you're asking me about someone I don't know? I don't know who you are. How did you get in my house?
They're all beaten down because Ruby's not around to make their lives happy and shiny. So they don't care. If somebody just shows up at their house, they're like, whatever. We don't know. Who cares?
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. And it's things like that, which is why I only gave the episode a 7. And just final thing, and this is just very something that only like Londoners will notice. So when Ruby arrives home, she gets off the bus. The bus pulls in. I think there's a Christmas song playing. And as the bus pulls in, the camera kind of starts on the bus stop. And I don't think that was an accident, because on the top of the bus stop, it says London Carriage Association. Now, why I'm pointing that out is because there is no such thing as a London Carriage Association. That is a total fiction. At any of these bus stops you will see in London, it might just say buses, or it might maybe say Transport for London, who are like the authority that they basically run London Transport. I assume they weren't allowed to use the name for whatever reason. I don't know, copyright reasons, I have no idea. But I just thought it was probably funny that Russell was told, we can't use Transport for London, Russell. So it's like, you need to make up a fake authority for London Transport. And he came up with London Carriage Association. If you don't live in London, you probably would have no idea. Probably think the London Carriage Association is real. I can tell you that it's not.
Well, there's your episode. So the dark, sinister plot that is the London Carriage Association.
I do hope it's a regular thing. Yeah, I do hope it's a regular thing now. When Ruby goes home, we see that on like bus stops and train stations, the local tube and stuff. And if we just end with our MVPs for the episode. So, Mike, who was your MVP for the Church and Ruby Road?
Oh, Shooty got one. I don't even have to elaborate on it. He was amazing.
Okay, Chris, and who was yours?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this was his chance to sell the new Doctor in the relaunch series, and he nailed it just like Christopher Eccleston did in Rose. You're right there. You know it. Even if you've never seen an episode before, you understand it, and you're attracted to that character thanks to his ability to draw people in.
I like Shooty a lot and looking forward to seeing obviously more from him throughout the year starting in May. But my MVP was Millie Gibson. I haven't taken to a new companion like this so quickly since Bill, who was one of my favourite companions ever.
Love Bill.
Yeah.
It was the best.
Yeah, she was tremendous. Massive fan of what she's done already. And also, you remember, I think she's just turned 19. So self-assured. So young. I know she's been on TV before, but I've never actually. She was in Coronation Street, but I've never seen her in anything personally. So I was so impressed by how good she was, and to the point where I'd taken to her so quickly that I was already thinking, I'm going to be absolutely devastated when she leaves, because I'm sure it'll be a heartbreaking end to the story when she leaves the Doctor or the Doctor leaves her, however it comes to an end. That'll be a really, really sad day. And that day, despite what actually some of us spoke about, may be slightly sooner than we think, because the week of us recording this, and maybe not everyone's seen it, she gave an interview with Fabric magazine, and she was asked standard questions, and I think the last question, penultimate question, was about, so what's your plans for 2024? And she said, well, obviously with the strike now over, it's getting back out there, and she used the word auditions and stuff. Doctor Who social media already kind of that's sent the bat signal already online, so some people have already definitely seen this. But she used the word auditions. I know she's been in contact with Karen Gillan. I think Gillan reached out to her when she got the job, just to say, congratulations. So I think they've had some brief contact. Karen Gillan is obviously a former Doctor Who companion who now works in America. And the notion of the strike now being over, well, the strike was an American strike. It wasn't a strike over here. It wasn't a British strike. It's actually why they finished the new season of House of the Dragon on schedule. So there was no strike stopping her getting jobs over here. So if she's like, oh, the strike's over, she's thinking stateside. And that would kind of infer that even though she's currently filming or has recently finished filming what would be her second series, that might be it. And she might be done. So we may only have 2 years with her. So come 2025, which isn't that far away, that might be it. So if you're a fan of Ruby Sunday already as much as I am, you may want to make the most of the time we get with her. It might not be that long.
I have questions as to whether Shugi Gawa is going to be around more than 2 seasons, because
same.
He is a major star now in terms of the press that he's gotten from the Barbie movie, from other projects that he's done, and just from Doctor Who. I mean, he's been on more magazine covers than any other Doctor Who star. that wasn't Doctor Who magazine than anybody else that I can think of. Even before he was even on the screen, he was everywhere. So it's just, to me, I wonder, I mean, obviously I'd love for him to stay, at least 3 seasons. I feel like 3 seasons is sort of the standard now for, the relaunch show since 2005. But I wouldn't blame him if he wanted to go and capitalize on that in some way and end up a major star. I mean, he has the potential to be a major star, just like Matt Smith has been, just like David Tennant has been, to really use that platform to jump off into even bigger projects and bigger stardom.
I think his ceiling is higher than both of those 2 previous Doctors. As far as stardom, I agree. He may not go beyond 2. But I will be surprised if Davis, on his return as showrunner, only ends up writing for 1 Doctor.
I feel like he's kind of setting things up that he maybe has a more hands-on role for these couple of seasons, and then maybe has more of an executive role and kind of cultivates a new set of showrunners while he's still there to kind of offer some advice and counsel, but kind of setting up for the future of the show, in 3, 4, 5 years' time, to kind of make sure that there's that continuity there and that it doesn't happen again, that a showrunner leaves, as Chibnall did, and everybody's like, well, who's going to take over now? And there was kind of a paper lock in terms of deciding who was going to be next. And if Russell T. Davies had not stepped back in and decided to come back, who knows, would we have a Doctor Who now? Would there have been a 60th anniversary specials? Would there have been a David Tennant coming back? Probably not. Probably none of those things were to happen. So you kind of have to cultivate the talent to take over after he's gone. And I feel like that's kind of going to be his role after these couple of seasons, to kind of gradually be a little more hands-off and give the authority to other people who can take it into the future. And, when we get to the 75th anniversary, we'll look back and we'll all see exactly how that unfolded and kind of what his plan was. And hopefully whatever his plan is will work out.
I should say I actually don't think that's the case, because first, his production company partly produced the show now. That wasn't the case before. So they actually have a vested interest of being involved in the show beyond however long David stays, but also he kind of inadvertently gave away that he's doing 4 series. He accidentally gave away that he's got a 4 series run, like he did last time.
1 year, right? Okay, series. Let me think. Series 4. Okay, I'm going to write an episode that's all music with no dialogue.
Series 4. So you're going to be doing it.
We're planned ahead.
We
want series 3. There's no room in series 3.
He's doing 4 series. We've got that.
All right.
Whether it's 2 series or 4 series, I mean, I feel like he's going to use that time to cultivate whoever is next.
Oh, I would hope so.
He's going to spend that time to absolutely figure out who the next team of people are. Sort of like, what happened the first time around with Moffat. Who's going to be the obvious candidate to take over and make it a smooth transition?
Well, not just him, but Jane Tranter, Phil Coddington, Julie Gardner, Vicky DeLow. Like they have a bigger production team now.
I think the goal is to make Bad Wolf synonymous with Doctor Who, and to see Bad Wolf as the place that you go. It's kind of like your in-house Doctor Who boutique. And I think that's why they've emphasized and done such a great job with social media. They've talked about spin-offs. They've essentially, with this bi-regeneration thing and this argument, which we obviously don't have time to go into, but this idea that any of the other Doctors are available, you could always do past stories with them too. I think that Davies has always said that he wants to move this brand out as much as he can, and I think that's how it survives, right? What can we do to generate this? What can we do to create a brand? And slowly but surely over here, that's built. For 50 years, that's built up into what we have now. So I would definitely agree that the goal is to create a brand that you can trust to hold on to this, and then from within there, launch spin-offs, and then eventually I think you'll start seeing them doing their own thing and kind of play in that direction.
Yeah, we never had someone in charge who's more invested in the future and the safety and security of the show than we have now. So even if you ain't a fan of his storytelling, there are many reasons to be grateful that Davis is here, and hopefully the reality turns out to work out as well as the plans. Okay, so yeah, if you have any thoughts on what we've spoken about here, you can email us at analysingdoctor@gmail.com. That's analysing spelled with an S. And you can also reach us at Twitter and Instagram at analysingdw. So Chris, Mike, thank you both for being here.
Thanks you guys. Good chat.
And thank you for listening. We will be back with the podcast sometime in March. Until next time. Our logo was courtesy of Scott Mattison. His work can be found at planetrisecreative.com and on Twitter at planetrise. Our theme tune is by Mike Mould. We can be reached at analysingdoctorwho@gmail.com and on Twitter at analysingdw.